Welcome to Diagnosing Life, no copay required. My name is Ariana, and I am your host of Diagnosing Life. I diagnose patients by day, and I overthink everything at night, from the OR to the daily chaos. I'm bringing you real talk, not only about medicine, but about mindset, friendship, and all the messiness in between. So let's get into it. Today's episode, I'm going to speak about burnout, which I wish this was something that somebody told me before I started PA school. Burnout is real, and I missed most of the signs. And so in today's episode, I want to speak about all the signs that I've experienced and how I coped with the burnout. I'm also going to speak about what I keep learning and what I continue learning about setting boundaries and letting the rest be enough. So my question is to you. Have you ever felt overstretched mentally, emotionally heavy, or if you're operating on autopilot? If the answer is yes to any or all of these questions, then this episode is just for you. So burnout started for me very early on in PA school. I would like to say probably the first week. The first week, you are thrown with hundreds and hundreds of slides, and it goes for 4 or 5 different subjects. I'm talking about clinical medicine, pathology. You also have pharmacology, you have anatomy, and that is just a few of the courses that we were taking. And you had 50 to 100 slides for every single course. Being able to dissect every single topic and every single slide was only the half of it, because you get new slides thrown at you almost every single day. And that is when I started to experience my very first thing of burnout. Now, in undergrad, we tend to study at the very last minute, and most of us are able to get by. I was one of those fortunate people that I was able to study till the very last minute and get pretty good grades. Unfortunately, PA school was not like that, and it definitely hit me like a ton of bricks, especially on the first week. So let me paint a picture of what the first week really looked like. The week before PA school started, we were given a couple of slides for 2 of the classes, clinical med and pathology. Now, during these slides, we also had videos related to these slides that were lecture videos. And we were supposed to see the videos, see the slides, and learn everything, right? On day 1 of PA school, we had a 10-question quiz on the topics to see where we were at. I remember sitting down and taking this quiz and bombing the quiz. And when I say bombing, I mean 20, 30% on both of these quizzes. And I honestly felt like I didn't know anything at all. Now, after I got those quiz grades back, I knew that something had to change. And what did I think of doing? Doing overnighters. Now, I would stay up till 2, 3 in the morning trying to understand all the material. I would read each and every sentence and then go back to a book and try to understand the pathology of that. And while all of that is good, and that's definitely something that you should do, I was doing it completely wrong. And that led to my burnout. My fiance said I was irritable. It was hard for him just to be around me. My mother even noticed the same thing. I'm usually a very cheerful person, especially in the mornings, and I would wake up extremely grumpy, but I only had a couple of hours of sleep, so it was understandable. I was becoming something that I was not. And that was one of the first signs that I missed. I also became detached from my family and from my fiance. There was no more dates. There was no more family time. I was completely and utterly focused on school only, and I wouldn't play with my dogs. I wouldn't sleep. And that was definitely something that I should have taken into account, and I didn't. I lost myself for that first 4 to 6 weeks of PA school. I completely lost myself. My relationship with productivity was completely different. And I thought that if I did not accomplish everything that was on my list, on my to-do list, or on my planner, I didn't deserve to rest, because why rest when you have all of these things to do? And that was mistake number 2, because yes, you have a to-do list and you can have a planner. And I'm speaking to all of my type A people here. Just because you put it on your planner and just because you have a list that says to-do list does not mean that you have to complete it in one day. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow. Because if you are a type A person, you know that you thrive on accomplishment. You thrive on finishing your to-do list and crossing things out of your planner. And I know you have all of those different things highlighted. And unfortunately, that was not the healthiest route for me. And I had to step away from that. Another thing that happened was that I had to be comfortable with saying no. And as a people pleaser, as a type A person, it is very hard for me to say, I can't do that. I'm sorry. Like there's no way I can fit this in. But it was something that I had to learn how to say no to. And it didn't happen overnight. I'm not going to say it did because it really didn't. I ended up having to go into therapy and I learned how to say no because it is honestly extremely hard to say no, especially when you are used to saying yes to everything. You are used to being able to have 40 things on your plate and still be able to accomplish everything at the end of the day. But during PA school, this was completely different for me, and I could not juggle life. I could not juggle school and having a relationship and being mentally sane. Those three things, I did not know how to juggle them, and it was really, really exhausting. And my burnout hit extremely quick. A lot of people that are in PA school, a lot of students, if you ask them, how do you study? Some of them will say that they pull all-nighters, and kudos to those people. I was not one of those people. And a lot of people also thrive on being able to finish things at the last minute and study that things to the very last minute. I, unfortunately, in PA school was not one of those people. And it took 4 weeks for me to find out that I was not one of those individuals. And I didn't know the true meaning of burnout until I didn't care about things that I once loved. I didn't care if I missed date night with my man. I didn't care if I saw my family on the weekends. I didn't care if I got sleep because at the end of the day, the only thing I cared about was being to finish a task and cross out everything in my planner, and it wasn't healthy. This is something that is extremely hard for me to talk about because not a lot of people know about it. First time I got into PA school, I had a lot going on in my life. I had a lot of family issues. And like I said before, I thought I could juggle everything all at once. Not only that, but I did not know that my anxiety and my depression were at an all-time high. And no, I did not take anxiety and depression medication at the time. So like I mentioned, my first week of PA school, I failed both of my quizzes. Thankfully, they were not for a grade. But I did fail them. Got, I believe, a 30 in one, 40 in another. And I saw some of my peers saying, oh my God, that quiz was so easy. That first week, since I failed my first 2 quizzes, I had to go back and relearn what I was supposed to have already learned on a Monday. Monday night, they had already released all the PowerPoints for the lectures on Wednesday, which we had to review on Tuesday and also review the videos. Now, the videos were at least 2 hours long for every single class, and the PowerPoints were at least 60 plus slides. So I had to complete 2 days worth of videos in one day. You can imagine I did not sleep that night. And that was the first week of PA school. And it definitely hit me like a freight train. Every 4 weeks, we would go ahead and take our block exams. And we used to call these Black Mondays. Black Mondays is on a Monday, and we have 4 exams back to back, which include pathology, clinical medicine, pharmacology, and they would also rotate either anatomy or a patient education class that we used to have in that Monday. For example, on a Tuesday, we would have our practical for our patient education course. Then on a Wednesday, we would have an anatomy exam or that patient education course. Then on a Thursday, we would have our anatomy practical, which was in a cadaver lab. Then on a Friday, we would kind of just resume classes as normal. Now, that first day that we had Black Monday, that first week of exams, I can remember the weekend leading up to it. I did not sleep. I was extremely scared. And I remember that morning, I went ahead and woke up at 3 in the morning just to do some last minute studying. I did last minute studying until 7:30 in the morning. I did not have breakfast. I had coffee. And I remember opening my laptop and pressing to take the exam, and my heart rate shot up. I remember that I couldn't really read the sentences that were right in front of me because I was so nervous and my anxiety was at an all-time high that I completely blanked out. I didn't even know my name, to be quite honest. And I finished that exam, took a 15-minute break, took the second exam, took the third exam, then took the fourth exam. The grades came out and I did not want to look at my grades. I remember looking at the group chat of my group and I remember somebody saying, I think there was a mistake in the grades. I can't believe I did so good. Then another message popped up that said, man, I did so amazing. I didn't think it was going to be that easy. And so when I read those messages, I said, okay, perfect. The grades are up. Doesn't look like people did bad until I opened my scores. And not only did I fail one exam, or two, or three, but I failed all four exams. I failed all four exams of PA school. And I remember being completely devastated. I had never failed an exam in my life. I had studied so hard for those 4 weeks and I had given up so much of my life. I had missed date nights. I had not hung out with my family. I did not speak to my friends that were outside of PA school, and I still managed to fail all four exams. And I started crying. I remember hyperventilating, and I remember telling my fiance, I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe. What I didn't know was that I was experiencing a panic attack, and I don't know how it happened, but one of my dogs kind of got on top of my chest and calmed me down, and I was able to regain my breathing and everything went back to normal. My heart rate came back down. And that was the first time that I experienced a panic attack. And that's when I knew that something was different. I was experiencing something different this time around, and I didn't know how to control it. There was one person in my group chat that didn't respond to any of those messages, kind of like I did. And I went ahead and texted her, and she also had experienced some failure, not quite as much as I did, but she did experience failure and she knew exactly how I was feeling. And we kind of bonded over that. And I'm happy to say that she's one of my best friends right now. I also bonded with this other girl in my group that exceeded in every single exam that we took. She's amazing, and she is also one of my best friends. And those two girls honestly have helped me with my anxiety and helped me through PA school tremendously. And if it wasn't for their support and study sessions that we had, I don't think I would be sitting here today. So what happened after I failed those four exams? I went ahead and continued that first week. I went ahead and finished all of the exams of that week, and I was able to pass a few, but at the end of the day, I already knew that I had failed four exams. As somebody who prides themselves on being the smart one or understanding material, once you fail those four exams, my mind was constantly going on, am I even supposed to be here? Am I in the wrong place? Why am I dumb? And I couldn't study. I couldn't even think correctly. And the imposter syndrome was real. And that is when I realized I was burned out. I went ahead and I spoke to my advisors and I spoke to the department of my program and let them know that about everything was going on, about my family issues, about my anxiety, about my depression, about how I was only sleeping 2 or 3 hours a day, how I wasn't myself and people around me were noticing that I was completely different. And so they let me know that this was not very normal for someone and I probably should seek some help. And so that is when I started seeing a therapist. I started seeing the therapist right after my block exam. And, I was explaining everything that I was experiencing. And she did give me some coping mechanisms that I use today. We also talked about saying no and how having so many things put on my plate was not going to help me succeed. It was not going to get me where I wanted or needed to be. I remember that first session, I cried so much, but I felt so relieved at the end of that session. And she asked me a question. Do you think that PA school is for you at this moment in the state of mental health that you are right now? Can you imagine somebody asking you that question after you have worked so hard to be in that position that you are right now, to have been accepted to PA school and be sitting in that chair and somebody telling you, are you sure you're mentally able to finish out this year? That was really hard for me. Because looking back at that moment, I felt my entire world crumble. But the truth was that I wasn't mentally prepared to be in PA school at that day, at that moment in that year. I wasn't ready for it. My anxiety was at an all-time high. My depression was horrible. And my depression was bad even before I got to PA school. I was crying almost every single day. And I could not explain it, but I didn't want to go to the doctor. And so I did talk therapy. I did talk therapy for another week, I believe, or another week or two after my block exam. And at the end of that second week, I came to that conclusion that I was not mentally ready to be in PA school at this moment. I still was not sleeping well, maybe 3 hours a day. And because I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't comprehending material. And I let my advisor and my dean know about what I was thinking about doing, and they were okay with it, and I went ahead and took a leave of absence. It was extremely embarrassing for me to take a leave of absence, and not a lot of people know that I did take a leave of absence, but it was necessary for me. That leave of absence in that year, I learned so much about myself, about my anxiety, about my depression. And I also got on medication to help with it. Along with my medication, I also did therapy sessions that helped with it. And I learned some coping mechanisms to help with everything that was going on. I started writing on a journal at least 5 minutes every morning. I started meditating just a little bit. I learned to take time for myself. I learned to love myself again and tell myself that it is okay if I don't accomplish everything on my list. And that is fine. I also learned that having that really strong support system is exactly what I needed in my life. And I had to lean into it. And I had to lean on my partner, my family, and to trust that they were there for me through the good and the bad. I really had time to reevaluate everything, figure out coping mechanisms for when I was extremely stressed and extremely burnt out. And I did it. And this is how I did it. There are 3 things that I followed to a T throughout PA school. The first thing is always have time for your partner and your family. Every Saturday, I would try to hang out with my family as much as possible. Every Thursday, we had date night. So my fiance and I started date night when we first started dating almost 8 years ago. And every Thursday we go out, no phones. We didn't talk about school, or we try not to talk about work. And we are just there together dating once again. The third thing that I did was I made sure that I had at least 6 hours of sleep. It's not 8 hours, but it's 6 hours. It's something. I was able to function at that point. And one thing that I am so grateful for was that my partner at 9 p.m., he would come into the office and tell me, hey, it's time to stop studying, close your laptop, let's go. And he would not leave the room until I officially closed my laptop. So we would close the laptop, we would make some tea, and we would go to bed. Now, why a 9 p.m. cutoff? The reason why a 9 p.m. cutoff was because I came to this idea of if I didn't know the material at 9 p.m., I wasn't going to know the material at 2 a.m., and I was not going to recognize the material on the test. So why even try? And I'd rather have some sleep and be able to wake up tomorrow with a refreshed mind and study that material all over again. And probably the next day I would end up figuring it out. And 9 times out of 10, the next day I knew exactly why a certain drug had a certain mechanism of action, or a certain disease had to be categorized a certain way. At the end of the day, in the morning, I always knew the answer because my mind had time to rest. It had time to reevaluate everything and breathe a little bit. And that is the best thing that I ever did to myself, was have a cutoff for studying and in the morning reconvene. Now, I did that all throughout didactic year, all throughout clinical year. And when I studied for my PANCE, I made sure that I would stop studying around 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and I went to sleep. I would wake up in the morning around 7 a.m. I would work out or go for a walk, make my coffee, have breakfast, and then I would start studying. And I always made sure to get 6 to 8 hours of sleep during my PANCE studying. And I passed my PANCE on the first try. So kudos. But it always left me thinking, why is it that the culture in medicine allows us to think that burnout is normal? And if you speak to doctors, residents, PAs, or anyone in the healthcare field, and you ask them about burnout, everybody says that they've experienced it either in their training, in their work life today. Burnout in the medical field is normalized in every single aspect. And it's not really spoken about that much, not until we have our breaking point. And I feel that it is important to speak about burnout and speak about the importance of creating boundaries for yourself in order to decrease the rate of having that burnout. Now, am I saying that I never was burnt out the second time that I went into PA school? Absolutely not. There was definitely times that I was burnt out, especially during finals week when we had 14 exams in a span of 10 days. Absolutely, I was burned out. But I made sure to still get those 6 hours of sleep. I made sure to get all the information that I needed before I had to study for these exams. I would study every single day as if the exam was the next day. Because if I did that, I didn't have to risk studying last minute. And I feel that school, that's one of the most important things that they don't really tell you is study every day like your exam is the next day. Because if you study every single day, then by the time that the exam comes, a week before, you're just reviewing material. There's only so many ways that a disease can be dressed. And that is important to know. That's one thing my pathology professor told me when I went to his office one time to review a test. He said, you know the material, you just freak out whenever the question is dressed a certain way. It's like there's only so many ways that a question can be dressed, and you have to know every single outfit. And it's the truth, the more that you study it, the more that you understand the foundation of that disease, every question after that is going to come so easy. You'll start to recognize buzzwords, or you'll start to recognize patterns for every single disease. And once I figured that out, my study mechanism, my study system was untouchable. When I was studying, I would make sure that I always had a break. So I would study for 45 minutes and then I would take a 10-minute break. And I would do about 4 to 5 rounds of this. And then I would take a big break, which was an hour break. And during this break, I would walk around, I would eat, I would talk on the phone. I did anything other than speak about medicine. And it was great. I did that all of didactic year. I did that during my clinical rotations, and I did really well on all of my EORs, except for one. That was like psychology is not my best subject, but that's a story for another day. We don't have to talk about psych right now. But at the end of the day, I studied through this method throughout my entire PA school career, including studying for the PANCE. So in the PANCE, I would study for 60 minutes because that's exactly how it is in every block. So I would study for 60 minutes. Then I would take a 10-minute break. And I did this all day for the month and a half that I studied. And by the time that the exam came, I was already used to sitting on a chair, sitting on in front of a computer, staring at a screen for 6 hours a day. And it was simple for me. I didn't feel fatigue. I didn't feel that burnout that many people feel while taking this exam because I prepared my mind for it. So what are the things, or what are the mechanisms that I learned throughout my career of being a student that has helped me with burnout? The first thing, like I mentioned, was getting at least 6 hours of sleep. Extremely important for your mind to rest, for your soul to rest, and for you just to have some time to rest. Something I found was taking walks. And yes, I'm talking about a hot girl walk. You can go ahead and take a walk with your pups, take a walk with your friends or your partner or your family. Just take a 45-minute walk outside and just breathe. It's really important for you to just take a 45-minute walk a day and just relax as much as possible and forget about anything related to school, anything related to your job. Third thing that helped me was make time for joy and laughter and family. Like I said, I did date nights with my mans, and every Thursday we would just relax, laugh, and enjoy each other. On the weekends, I had time to spend with my family, and that was really helpful too. It's important to think about things other than just school, other than just work. And being able to be in that mindset was what helped me succeed in school. Another thing that was extremely important and something that I am still working on today is giving yourself some grace. Now, like I said in the beginning, I'm a type A person. I like to have a planner. I am the type of person that has almost every hour mapped out. And yes, I had this on my planner set up to do a podcast at this time, at this day. Like I said, I'm still working on myself. However, I give myself some grace. If something is not done at that certain hour, or I don't complete something in that day that I had it, I am okay with circling it on my planner and moving it on to another day. I'm okay with that now. Before, I would stay up until everything on my to-do list was scratched out. And I hated having to rewrite something for another day because it wasn't supposed to be that way. And I learned to give myself grace. We're only human. It's okay if you don't complete something that you were supposed to complete. The only person that knows that you didn't complete it is you. I know. That's a little crazy, right? You're the only person that knows that because you're the one that set those expectations for yourself. Just remember, you have the same 24 hours as Taylor Swift. And would Tay-Tay be mad that she didn't accomplish everything in one day? Absolutely not. She would totally go ahead and move it to the next day. And that is a hill that I will die on. And nobody can tell me otherwise because that's the only thing that helps me keep living a little bit more free. We just have to remember, and especially being in the medical field and knowing how demanding it is and knowing that burnout is real. One thing that we have to remember is rest is productive. You don't have to hit a breaking point in order to completely rest. You don't have to hit a breaking point in order to deserve it. And that is something that I am so happy that I was able to learn because the first time that I did PA school, I didn't know that. I hit my breaking point. I hit rock bottom. I burnt out and I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about my life. I didn't care about my family. I didn't care about anything. I wasn't sleeping because at the end of the day, the only thing that was going to make me happy was being able to succeed in this program. And I wasn't even doing that. Now, the second time around that I did PA school, I knew the signs to look for burnout. I knew what burnout looked like and I knew what it felt like. And I didn't want to feel that way ever again. And I made sure to take my rest. I made sure to sleep. The only thing I can do now is kind of share my experience with everyone else and share my experience about burnout. And people need to know that they're not alone on the feelings that they're experiencing. I felt it too. And those were the signs that I had. And hopefully you're able to get some of the coping mechanisms that I learned and put it in your own day-to-day life. It also took me a long time to realize that burnout doesn't mean that you're weak. It just means that you're doing way too much. And just remember, you're allowed to take a break. It's normal to take a break. And just because you take a break or take a pause, that doesn't mean you're not ambitious. That doesn't mean that you're not going to accomplish your goals or what you set yourself to do. It just means that you need a break. I'm still learning how to deal with burnout as a certified physician assistant, living and breathing and working a full-time job. I'm still trying to figure out how to balance planning a wedding, learning everything I have to learn for clinic, and having time for my family. So yes, I'm still learning, but I'm choosing to learn out loud so that you don't feel alone. So that I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me today on my therapy session. If this episode helped you or resonated with you, or you know of someone who needs to just have a breather today, send this to them. Send it to a family, to a friend or a colleague, or anyone that might enjoy listening to this. So I would love to hear how you're navigating rest and burnout. So send me a DM on Instagram at diagnosing.life. And I will see you next Tuesday. Bye.